Hello there, I am Richie Stormtrooper. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to new viewers and also welcome back subscribers. This is my little space on the net dedicated to costuming. In particular, we are looking at an original Stormtrooper costume from the first Star Wars movie and New Hope, Episode 4, whatever you want to call it. Before we do get started, if you find this video interesting or useful, please do like and subscribe. I'd love to have you on board. I'm going to be posting regular tutorials, 1 to maybe 2 a week, depending on how much time I get. Going to take you through this complete armor build step by step, and I will be telling you in tutorials how to build each part and assemble all the different bits and pieces. I have picked out the biceps, the 4 parts which make up our biceps armour. I quite often like to start here, just a nice easy part to start off with. I know I have good solid references. Before we had access to some of the references that I'm going to be using, there was a tendency to go for a really idealised chunky look. So I have the opportunity here to leave that edge here rather thick. And when we think of a suit of armour, we think of something that's bulky and robust. Now, the reality was a lot of this was trimmed out on the original suits, so I'm going as close to accurate as possible. It also makes the parts, certain parts, a lot more comfortable if you leave them rather flat. So I'm going for something around this. I've matched it to my original part. On this little raised part, it didn't necessarily follow that curve, so you can continue along the same line, obviously varying your finger gauge. There we go. And that's pretty much an accurate kind of thickness, I feel. I'm going to take some. This is still rather rough, so we take some sandpaper. Get in there quickly. Smooth it off a bit. I won't be doing very much measuring. This is all kind of eyeballed. It's really just looking at screenshots and photos of original parts and roughly trying to replicate it. And that's good to go. Right then, when it comes to assembling the biceps parts, there's a very easy guide. These will probably not come marked. The easiest place to start then is here. There are 2 inner sections of armour. One has a very prominent thumbprint. One doesn't. Then you may come across a kit which has 2 parts that are exactly the same. They both have a thumbprint because some kits are cast from a kit where only one armour was available, so both sides are the same. In that case, you will have 2 identical parts and you will just have to use what you have. This is an RS Props kit. Also, the Trooper Master kit is the same. It has correct left and right parts. The one with the thumbprint is for the left. The one without the thumbprint is for the right. That leaves us with our 2 outer parts. They look the same, but you will notice that they are roughly mirrored. There is one side which is largely flat, largely straight, and one which has a curve to it. Straight, curved. All we have to do to match these up, we don't need to necessarily know which is which. We take the part, hold it against it. The inner part also has a flat and a curved edge. We match our curved edge to the curved edge, flat to flat, and then we have a matching pair. For the next part of the assembly of the biceps, I have, as you will see, I've taken off my hoodie and also put on the matching hat to match the t-shirt. The main point being, of course, we're going to be doing some fitting. We're going to be fitting the parts to my arms, so we don't need any bulky clothing. When you dress as a Stormtrooper, in the end, you're obviously going to be having on your skin-tight undersuit, so bare skin or a t-shirt is the best way to replicate that. A thick sweatshirt or a jumper, hoodie, sweater, whatever will add too much bulk, and we need to fit these to our arms now. We are going to be needing the cover strips that we cut beforehand. If you want to see the video about cover strips, cutting them, the sizing, etc., etc., click on this link. These are the two 15mm wide strips that we're going to be needing for our biceps. Should be plenty material. We're also going to be needing a brush or some brushes, our plastic weld, and I'll be using some super glue. Alternatively, we can do this all with the E6000. In this video I will assemble one bicep using my preferred method of using the plastic weld, and the other one I will assemble completely with the E6000, just to give you the alternative method. The biceps parts are in fact amongst the trickiest to fit. There is, like all parts, a cover strip on both sides, but unlike the other parts, the cut line is very variable on both sides. On something like the legs, for instance, there is a raised ridge on the front, and that's going to be just a little bit thicker. Together with the opposite matching part, it's going to form a ridge which is just thicker than the cover strip that we're going to be using, so there's not much variation on the front. It's pretty much a set size, a little bit wider than 20mm. All the variation is on the back then, where there is no raised ridge. We can vary where we cut that. That's not the same on these biceps. As you can see, on neither of the sides is there a raised ridge, so I can vary where I cut on this part, further out, further in, and here the same thing. One observation that may help is that the inner sections have less leeway, less range for variation. We're going to start off pretty much by not trimming very much off this side. There is a little bit of a lip where it curls out, where it's come off the molds, where it's rough trimmed. We're just going to get rid of that excess initially. So really just trim a millimetre or two off the edge, following the exact straight line that's already in place, just to get rid of that little raised lip. And this area here is very close to already how the original parts were cut. There's not a great deal of room for variation on this side. This area, this edge is pretty much clean as it is. So most of our variation work is going to be on this side. We're going to be sizing on this side. And with these two parts now, we have something that we can tape together with our masking tape and then start sizing it. What I actually will do first of all is call up my references on my PC. I'll show you what I'm working with on screen. I have a few references of the original RS Propmaster suit itself, but I also have some good photos from the Lucasfilm archives of another suit, which are more to my taste. They're a little bit more revealing. They're better close-ups. I can see some of the detail more. By experience, I know that if I copied these exactly as a replica, they would be a little bit too narrow. The original suits were very slim on the biceps area. The guys, the stuntmen, the actors were by no means bodybuilders, very lean guys with not much muscle here, or either that or they were very, very restricted in their movement. One word of advice: you want your biceps to be wide enough to fit you comfortably, but they will look better slimmer. The slimmer they are, the better. There's nothing worse in my opinion than really oversized biceps underneath the shoulder bells that look really disproportionately large. It's just not a good look. So I've taped up my biceps roughly, and at this stage it's important to say I'm not going to be measuring anything. I'm not going to be taking a tape measure out to measure any parts really. It's at this stage it's all about looking at as many references as I can, looking at something that I like, assessing with the biceps how much are they tapered, meaning how much are they wider at the top and narrower at the bottom. The biceps on the RS props suit were less tapered than some others. Others were more tapered, so we can vary this angle. I can make it narrower at the bottom or wider at the bottom. I've got that very roughly in place. I'm overlapping the inside part over the top of the outside part. And while it's taped up, I can slip it over my arm. The best thing to do with the biceps is flex your arm to a right angle, 90-degree angle, and flex the bicep a little. And if you come too tight against the part and you can't flex completely 90 degrees, then you're going to need to go wider. I'm happy that it looks a reasonably good shape. I'm going to lose some of the taper, which logically will keep it in line with the RS prop suit, with the taper adjusted. A little more test fitting. It's a little tight. I can probably mark my line as it is and then cut outside that line just to give myself a little bit more leeway. Mark that line in pencil where the overlap is. And as you can see, in my case, I'm going to be losing quite a lot of material here on this side. Most of this is going to be cut. Once again, even when I have my parts taped up, it's a lot of looking at references, comparing, eyeballing, no real measuring. I'm really concerned with the shape. Once I get my shape right, that I feel it looks like a set of Stormtrooper biceps, I can then keep it aligned and vary the girth, the width and the circumference of the openings. And I'm going to make a first cut. One thing I do notice quite a lot on RS Prop Masters builds is that it's quite easy. It's important to line up the bottom parts so that this line continues relatively flat. There's a tendency for people to assemble them so that this curve is over pronounced. And if you look at the original suit, that followed pretty much straight. We don't want this effect, a real curve downwards towards what will be the floor. We want it kind of relatively straight aligned. And then when we do that, we notice that the allowance on the molds on this side means that we have what would rather be a diagonal line for our cover strip. Our cover strip is going to go over the top here, and we want it, once we're wearing these, to be pretty much vertical. Now if we didn't adjust the inner, the trim, we didn't trim the inner part and just took this as our guideline, we would have something that would look a bit too diagonal. So that suggests to me at this side as well, if we turn it the wrong way around for a second, I'm going to end up with something maybe a bit too diagonal, which suggests to me that we need to alter the angle of this cut. So instead of faithfully following this line, we're going to trim, as I say, there's a little notch there, and that's probably a good line, good guideline. So maybe something like that, cut a kind of wedge out of there and then realign. Just to reiterate, this is lots and lots of eyeballing, looking at your references, taping up your parts, fitting them, trying them on, drawing your lines, trimming, taping them up again. I've had this piece apart and taped together at least 4 or 5 times, and even now I'm happy that on one side I have both my cuts correct. So I have now taped them up once again so that they are fully butt jointed with no overlap. So as I am certain that I'm going to glue them on this side, to once again test fit the other side and get that absolutely right. So now I have a temporary join which is going to be exactly how I'm going to glue it on that side, and once again adjusting, marking, fitting, trying out until I am 100% certain. Trial and error, and never cutting before I'm absolutely certain. Right, so now we're happy with the actual fit of the two parts. We're going to stick them together, glue them together, and I'm going to use this biceps part to show you two options. I'm going to be using, on one side, I'm going to be using my favourite method of gluing parts together, plastic weld, and on the other side I'll show you how we can just use the E6000 adhesive. We're going to untape these again. I already have my cover strips cut to size, and this is where we're going to need our clamps and magnets. I'm going to line those sides up, and I'm going to start by clamping the cover strip on one side of my biceps at each end, and then try and match this part in there. Open up the clamp, position that right. At this point it can help to go in with a little bit of super glue gel. When I'm happy with the positioning, I like to put a little dab of super glue on the cover strip at the end, tiny little bit, and press it on gently. Put my clamp back on and go to the opposite end. Do exactly the same. And it just gives me a quick temporary bond, helps keep the parts in place. Now, if you've got a good set of clamps and a good set of magnets, it might not even be necessary. And then I'm going to use my strong rare earth magnets, bring these out and take these out in pairs. And I clamp over the cover strip along the seam, inside and out. Now I've actually gone back in here and I've covered the outside of the cover strip with a bit of our masking tape. Although we're going to try our best to keep the plastic weld, which is a very thin runny liquid, on the inside of the join, it can seep out to the outside, and what I find quite often is if that happens, you're left with an imprint of the magnet on the outside of the cover strip. And just for a little bit more of extra protection, in case some of the plastic weld seeps out, we've got some tape over there which should protect it from any unsightly dents and impressions. And I'm really just running a thin couple of drops. I'm really just letting a few drops seep into that seam, not so much that it's going to seep out of the other side, but you can slowly see the parts welding together. Start slowly, start with just dampening the brush. You can increase it as you get more confident. Shift your magnets to access all the parts of the seam. It's often quite a good idea to apply a few drops of the weld in one position and then immediately slide the magnets over that position so that it instantly holds the parts together as they dry and weld and fuse. Now, if you are particularly worried about creating a very strong join, or if you want help holding the parts in place as you do weld them together, it's often quite a good idea to use some of your scrap ABS material to create this kind of tab. Can you see that in there? I've taken my trimmings, scrap pieces of ABS like this, and I've just cut out a roughly rectangular strip and placed that on the inside of a seam as another additional join for the parts on the inside. This can be seen on quite a few original parts. If you want it to be extra strong and extra neat, what you can do is when you trim your parts, you can take the scrap from the entire length. Make sure you cut the entire length when you're trimming your part, and take that as a strip and place that strip inside across all the length of your part. It makes a very neat and a very strong bond. A previous build of mine, I have one tab at the top and one tab at the bottom. On the opposite side, I have a couple more in the middle. You can do as many or as few as you want. They're not entirely necessary, but they do help with holding the parts in position before you stick on the cover strip. In this case, we've tried it without tabs. I'm going to take my magnets off now and see exactly how that's turned out. And it seems to be holding just fine. I can peel off my masking tape and you can see there is a nice clean cover strip on the outside. I would even suggest that it's completely authentic to finish off welding by taking a very small amount on your brush and in fact allowing a couple of drops to drip into that crack on the outside. Now be very careful you're not painting over big strips of solvent over your actual part. Turn it horizontal, your seam horizontal, so that gravity will allow the liquid to drop into that seam, and just very carefully apply it to the corner. There's evidence on the original suits that there was solvent-based adhesive on the outside, just like that, and it seals these joints from the outside. One advantage or even disadvantage, depending on your viewpoint of the plastic weld, is that it cures rather quickly. As promised, I'm going to try and glue the other side using purely the E6000. Not much difference in our techniques. We're going to use our clamps and our magnets. The difference here being that this glue will take several hours to cure. What I'm going to do is apply a thin film to the middle of my cover strip. This is where it's going to sit over the join. For best effect, you can leave that for a few minutes anyway. I'll apply a tiny bit to each side of my seam on the biceps part itself. I find with the E6000 I need to use more magnets because the parts will separate a lot easier with it taking so much time to cure. You can really go to town with as many magnets as you need. You can double up, 2 on each side if need be, give you a stronger hold. I think that's going to hold now. Seems to be right. Quick last check, shift my cover strip into the proper position. It's not quite where I wanted it to be. And then I'm afraid it's a case of leaving that for At best, leaving it overnight. Definitely 6 to 8 hours before it reaches its final adhesion. And then I have my finished biceps part ready, glued together. As you see, fits nicely. What I still can do with that is I can trim off my cover strip if I feel I want it to fit a little bit better. Maybe trim up some of these edges. Certainly I can go back in and trim out some of the opening so that this matches, and there's no, here see I have a sharp edge there. I'm going to take that out, go with my shears, my plastic shears, bit of sanding, but otherwise I'm happy with that, and I'm ready to repeat with the right hand side. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If so, please do like and subscribe. I am posting regular tutorials as I progress through my build. At least once a week I will be posting a tutorial video. That will be on a Friday normally. If I manage to, then I will also be posting on Tuesday. So I'm trying to keep that rhythm Tuesday and Friday, but certainly at least once a week on a Friday. Following this video, having completed the biceps, I will move on to the forearms, and that will be our next video. I hope to see you there, and until then, take care.